On my 32nd birthday, my family forgot me again. Not a card, not a call, just one text at 9 at night that said, Happy B-Day, Han, hope it was a good one. And it was addressed to Katie. I do not have a sister. Katie is my cousin. My mother had copied and pasted a birthday text and forgotten to change the name. 3 days later, that same family threw my older brother Ryan a party that cost over $20,000. A rented ballroom, a live band, a chocolate fountain, my mother crying at the microphone about how proud she was of her wonderful son, 200 guests, and me standing at the back in a nice dress clapping, because that is what the forgotten one learns to do. But here is the part nobody in that ballroom knew. I paid for it. Every plate, every flower, the band, the chocolate fountain, all of it came out of money I had been sending my parents for 6 years, believing I was the only thing keeping them from losing their home. My name is Diana. I am 32 years old and I am an accountant. And 3 days after that party, I finally did the one thing I should never have waited 6 years to do. I followed the money, and what I found burned my entire family to the ground in 72 hours. If you have ever been the forgotten one while somebody else got the whole world, stay with me because this one is for you. Go ahead and subscribe right now and tell me in the comments whether your own family ever forgot your birthday. Let me take you back. The shape of my family never changed, so I can tell it fast. There were two children and there were two sets of rules. Ryan was the golden son, and I was the daughter who learned to make herself small. Every year of my childhood, Ryan got a party with a theme and a cake, and the whole family gathered around him. And every year, my birthday was an afterthought, if it was anything at all. I stopped expecting it before I was 10. The only person who ever remembered was my grandmother, Nana Ruth, who sent a card every single year, a few days early, so it would always arrive on time, and always wrote the same thing inside. To my Diana, who I have never once forgotten. Nana Ruth passed away when I was 26, and after her, no one remembered at all, so I did what forgotten children do. I left. I put myself through school, I became a certified public accountant, and I built a quiet, careful, stable life 2 states away. And I made real money. And the moment my family found out I had money was the moment they finally found a use for me. It started 6 years ago with a phone call from my mother, warmer than any call I had gotten in years. She said she and my father were struggling. His back had gone bad, he had cut his hours, their savings were thin, and they were terrified of losing the house I grew up in. And she asked, in a small, ashamed voice I had never heard her use, if I could help. And the forgotten child in me felt something she had waited her whole life to feel, needed. Finally, my family needed me, and some broken little part of me believed that if I saved them, they would finally see me. So I said yes, I set up an automatic transfer, $4,500 a month to keep my parents in their home. And whenever there was an extra emergency, a medical bill, a roof, my father's medication, I covered that too, and I never once said no. Over 6 years, I sent my parents just over $310,000, and I never asked to see a single bill because I was so grateful to finally be useful that I was afraid looking too closely would make it stop. Then, this year, my mother called about Ryan's $20,000 party, and at the end, she asked if I could send a little extra that month to help cover it because things were still just so tight. And for the first time in 6 years, the accountant in me woke all the way up and asked the obvious question. If my parents are so broke that I have to send them $4,500 a month, then where is the $20,000 for a chocolate fountain coming from? The math did not work. And when the math does not work, it is never the math that is lying. So that weekend, alone at my kitchen table, I pulled every record I had a right to pull. 6 years of my own transfers. The home equity line I had co-signed to, quote, fix the house. The business loan I had guaranteed for my father's, quote, retirement hobby. Everything I had signed without reading, because you do not read the fine print when you are finally being included. And I read all of it. And I found out exactly where $310,000 had gone. Almost none of it went to my parents. Their house had been nearly paid off the entire time. There was no back injury. My father had retired comfortably 4 years ago. The money, my money, had gone to Ryan. His downtown loft that he told everyone he owned, his leased Range Rover, his failed restaurant, his failed clothing line, his failed crypto scheme, each one propped up and buried with my money, funneled through my parents so their golden son would never once have to hear the word no. There was one line item that I will never forget as long as I live. 8 months earlier, I had sent my mother an extra $3,000 on top of the monthly money because she had called me crying that my father needed a dental procedure he could not afford and was in terrible pain. I had moved money out of my own emergency savings and sent it that same day because he was my father and he was hurting. There was no dental procedure. I found the charge. That $3,000 had paid the deposit on Ryan's Range Rover. My father was never in pain. My mother had invented his suffering word for word to move me faster so that my brother could drive a nicer car. When I found that one, I had to stand up and walk away from the table for a minute, because that was the moment I understood there was no bottom. There was no line these people would not cross. There was only how much I was willing to give, and they had been testing that number for 6 years, and they had never once found the edge of it. So I decided to show them the edge. The loans with my name and my credit holding them up were all his. My parents had spent 6 years telling their invisible daughter they were about to be homeless so they could keep their favorite child in a life he had never earned. And that is when I broke. I want to be honest with you about this part because it is the part that matters. I did not feel powerful sitting there at 2 in the morning. I put my head down on that kitchen table and I cried harder than I had cried since I was a child, not because of the money, because of what the money meant. I had given them everything, 6 years of my life, $310,000, my savings, my credit, my trust, and the last piece of hope I had that this family might someday love me back. And every single dollar of it had been a lie. I cried because I finally understood that they had never seen me as a daughter at all. They saw Ryan as a son to invest in, and they saw me as a resource to drain. That was the whole relationship. I cried for the little girl who made herself small so she would not be a burden. I cried for the woman who sent $4,500 a month into the same family that could not be bothered to spell her name right in a birthday text. I thought about everything I had gone without to send that money, the vacations I never took, the car I kept driving with 200,000 miles on it, the nights I sat alone in my apartment and told myself it was worth it, that I was doing something good, that family takes care of family. And the whole time, on the other end of that money, my brother was lounging by a pool at a loft he told people he owned, and my parents were bragging to their friends about how well Ryan was doing for himself. I had been eating leftovers so my brother could have a chocolate fountain. That is the sentence that finally broke me. I had been eating leftovers so my brother could have a chocolate fountain. I cried until there was nothing left. And then something else came up from underneath the crying, something cold and clear and steady, because when I lifted my head off that table, I did not feel weak anymore. I felt done. And I heard my Nana Ruth's voice, the one person who never forgot me, and I understood something she had been trying to tell me my whole life. I was not invisible. I had just been giving everything I had to people who had decided a long time ago that my job was to give and Ryan's job was to take, and they had never once faced a consequence for it, not one, because I had always been the floor under their feet. And I thought, very calmly, they have never had to stand on their own because I have spent my whole life being the ground. It is time they found out what the ground actually feels like. This was not going to be cruelty. This was going to be the bill coming due. I had earned the right to stop paying it, and they had earned every single thing that was about to happen to them. I want to say this clearly for anyone out there who is sitting where I was sitting that night, because I needed someone to say it to me, and no one ever did. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to stop bleeding for people who have never once bled for you. Loving your family does not mean being their fool forever, and protecting yourself is not revenge. It is just the moment you finally decide that your life is worth as much as theirs. I decided mine was. It only took me 32 years. So I did not scream and I did not confront anyone because a hurt person confronts, but an accountant reconciles. I told my mother warmly that of course I would help with the party. I even went to it. I put on the nice dress and I drove 2 states and I stood in that ballroom and watched my mother weep with pride over her golden son, and I clapped and I ate the $20,000 dinner with my eyes finally open because I wanted to see all of it one last time, and I will tell you the exact moment at that party that I stopped feeling anything at all. Halfway through the night, my mother took the microphone and she thanked everyone for coming, and she thanked the caterers and she thanked the band. And then she looked around the room and she said, "And I just want to say, this family has been through some hard times these last few years, but we always come through them together. Together." She said the word together in a $20,000 ballroom that I had paid for to celebrate the son that I had been funding 3 days after she forgot my birthday while I stood 10 feet away. And not one person in that room looked at me. 200 people, and not one of them knew that the together she was talking about was a bank account with my name on it. I raised my glass with everyone else, and inside, I felt the last thin thread that still tied me to these people quietly go slack. There was nothing left to save, so I stopped trying to save it. And I started very calmly to close it down. The whole time I was smiling, I was preparing. The morning after the party, I called my own attorney, and then, quietly, over 3 days, I built the end of it. No warnings, no angry texts, An accountant does not warn you. She simply closes the account. The first thing I did was stop. I canceled every automatic transfer, effective immediately. The second thing I did was protect myself because the guarantees and cosigns with my name on them were the real trap, and I had my attorney formally withdraw me where the law allowed and demand documentation on the rest, which dragged every one of those hidden loans out into the daylight. And the third thing, the thing that finished it, was that I stopped protecting them from the truth. I sent one email, not angry, just numbers, because numbers do not have to be angry to be devastating. I sent it to my mother, my father, and Ryan, and I copied my aunt and two cousins who had spent years hearing about how selfish I was. It was a simple, itemized accounting. Every dollar I had sent over 6 years, where each dollar had actually gone, and one line at the bottom. I know now. The bank will be in touch. Do not contact me. Then I turned off my phone, and for the first time in 6 years, I slept through the entire night 72 hours. That is all it took because a life with no foundation does not fall slowly. It falls all at once the moment you stop holding it up. Within one day, Ryan's Range Rover was flagged for repossession because the lease payments had been coming out of a transfer that no longer existed. Within 2 days, the restaurant loan, my money, went into default the moment my attorney demanded the documentation, and the bank started calling the actual borrowers, my parents, for the full balance. And within 3 days, my parents, who had spent their own real savings years ago and had been quietly living on my monthly money the whole time, could not cover their own ordinary bills because the daughter shaped faucet was finally permanently off. The golden son had nothing because the money was never his. The parents had no cushion because their cushion had always been me. And the beautiful machine that had run for 6 years on nothing but my hope stopped completely, 3 days after a $20,000 party for the one person in that family who had never contributed a thing. The voicemails came. My mother, furious, then pleading, then furious again. My father, lecturing me about blood being thicker than water, a man who had faked a back injury for 4 years. And Ryan, my brother, calling his invisible sister for the first time in years, screaming that I had ruined his life. I answered none of them. I sent my mother exactly one reply, 6 words. You forgot my birthday again this year, and I never spoke to any of them again. But the part they will remember for the rest of their lives is not the repossessed car, or the defaulted loan, or the money finally running out. It is that email. Because when I laid out those numbers, every dollar and exactly where it went, and I sent it to the aunts and the cousins and the whole extended family, I did not just cut off the money. I ended the story they had been telling about themselves for 6 years. For 6 years, my parents had played the humble, struggling couple, and Ryan had played the successful young businessman, and I had played the cold, distant daughter who never came around. That one email rewrote all three of us in a single afternoon, permanently, in front of everyone whose opinion my mother had ever cared about. Now the whole family knew. They knew the struggling parents had been conning their own daughter. They knew the successful son had never earned a dime in his life. And they knew the cold, distant daughter had quietly been carrying every last one of them the entire time. My mother did not lose her house that week. She lost her story. And for a woman who lived her whole life for what the family thought of her, losing the story was the one thing she could never recover from. That is the revenge they will still be feeling 20 years from now. Not the money, the truth. Here is where everyone landed, and then I want to tell you the one thing that made all of this worth it. Ryan lost the loft, the car, and the last failing business, and for the first time in 35 years, he had to get a real job. And I am told he is not very good at it, because a man who has carried his whole life never grows legs. My parents downsized into the smaller, honest life they had been hiding behind a lie, which is its own kind of justice for people who performed poverty to fund a fantasy. And me. A month later, I found the last birthday card Nana Ruth ever sent me, to my Diana, who I have never once forgotten, and I decided to do something with the money I would have kept sending that family. I started a fund in her town that does exactly one thing. It throws birthday parties for kids in foster care, the forgotten ones, the ones who have learned to make themselves small. Every one of them gets a party with their name on it, spelled right, and a cake, and one adult in the room whose only job that day is to be glad they were born. I call it Ruth's List because my Nana kept a list her whole life of every person she refused to let go unseen, and now I keep it too. So here is what I need you to hear if your family has ever forgotten you. It is not because you are forgettable. It is because they decided you were the one who gives and someone else was the one who gets, and they were counting on you never doing the math. Do the math. The day you stop being the ground that people who never helped you walk on, you find out the truth they spent your whole life hiding. You were never the one who needed them. They were the ones who needed you. If this story meant something to you, please take a second to like it and to share it with someone who has always been the forgotten one, because it might be exactly what they need to hear today. And subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell, because we tell one of these stories about quiet people finding their strength every single time, and I would love for you to be here for the next one. Tell me in the comments about the person like my Nana Ruth who never once forgot you, and I will see you in the next one.